The Niners were one defensive stop away from winning the Super Bowl last season, and you know what? Brock Purdy's great, CMC's great, this defense is great, and they should be there again. So let's go ahead and discuss. What's crack-a-lackin'? It's your boy Broshmo, just in case you did not know so, and welcome back to the Deep Dive series where we take a look at each and every NFL team and project how they're going to do in 2024. And today I have your San Francisco 49ers. But before we get to a 2024 projection, let's see how things shaped up last season. The 49ers began the season on a 5-game winning streak, and they were one of two teams to remain undefeated through the first 5 weeks of the year. They were truly dominant until losing to the PJ Walker-led Cleveland Browns. I get it. The conditions, they were messy. Rookie kicker Jake Moody missed multiple field goals, including the game winner. But unfortunately, that lackluster play would continue as Brock Purdy threw 2 costly interceptions to Cameron Bynum in a loss to the Vikings. The defense, a week later, would get cooked by Joe Burrow and the Bengals, and what started out as a promising season was starting to come off at the hinges, and the Niners' bye week literally came at the right time as they would follow that up with a 6-game winning streak. The Niners were hot, they were cruising, and then they traveled to Baltimore for Monday Night Football. The Niners were 11-3 and looking like the best team in football, but no one told MVP winner Lamar Jackson that as he spanked the Niners. To be fair, the offensive line got pretty banged up, and as a result, Brock Purdy was having a pretty uneven game, and then eventually he got banged up. Sam Darnold entered. Ultimately, it was just a sucky loss. Fortunately, a meeting with the Commanders got the Niners back on track, and they were able to secure the 1 seed, get in to rest their starters in the regular season finale. The Niners got their first taste of postseason action in a back-and-forth victory over the Packers in the divisional round, and then they came back from behind in the second half versus the Detroit Lions to secure their spot in the Super Bowl. They would take on the Kansas City Chiefs, and unfortunately they would fall short in overtime, settling for a field goal and giving the Chiefs a chance to win, which they did. In terms of efficiency, the Niners were the best team in football, and I know that the Russian defense EPA looks pretty bad at 26 overall, but it's also a bit deceiving because the Niners spent so many of their games ahead that they didn't really need to stop the run, just the big play. The Niners defense allowed the 3rd least rushing yards all season, and they were the least rushed on team in football. That's why analytics are nice, but they're only important with the context of film. Regardless, this team was as good as it gets. Real quick, I gotta give a shout out to today's sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. I absolutely love Underdog Fantasy because I love football, and now that the football season is far and away, it doesn't mean my betting season has to be because they do all kinds of sports, whether it's baseball, basketball, esports even. They got you covered, whether that's weekly best ball or my favorite, higher lower on player props. So if you sign up at Underdog Fantasy using promo code BROSHMO, then they will give you a first time deposit up to $250. That's right. So if you're gonna go and bet with Underdog Fantasy, use promo code BROSHMO, take advantage of this offer, but please bet responsibly and bet within your means. The Niners lost close to nothing this offseason. We are still currently waiting to see if Brandon Ayuk gets traded, and I'm actually currently recording this portion of the video Saturday, so if he does somehow get traded before I release this, I'll be sure to add that in the video. But in terms of losses, they really didn't have much. Like, you have Eric Armstead, who, let's be honest, he'll be 31. He's coming off a meniscus tear. He was also injured in 2022, so it was probably about time to get off of that contract. You also have safety Tayshaun Gibson Sr., who wasn't brought back either, but he's 33, and he's going to have to serve a 6-game suspension. So, I mean, they have the heir apparent to him anyway, so it didn't make sense bringing him back. You had Chase Young, but he was a half-year rental to kind of just help increase their odds for the Super Bowl. There was no way that they were going to pay him. So they truly barely lost anything. So let's just go ahead and go over some of these additions. When it comes to what this team added during free agency, there wasn't really the big name. Instead, they added solid contributors, especially considering they didn't lose that much. Like, again, Eric Armstead, probably the biggest name. Again, Brandon Ayuk withstanding. I'm recording this portion of the video on Sunday. Still has not been traded yet. But they did a really good job of going out there and specifically addressing that defensive line via free agency. So let's go ahead and get into it with Leonard Floyd probably being their biggest signing here. Played for the Bills last year. Just a really good all-around player. A bit undersized at that, like 240, 245. But someone who I would say is a very good option in the rotation. Because like outside of like Nick Bosa, you're really dealing with just kind of a rotation bunch of that other edge spot. Last year, whether it was like Cleveland Farrell, you had Randy Gregory, Drake Jackson. So Floyd now gonna like kind of be the guy on the outside if we want to talk about what he did specifically last year. 41 pressures, 12 sacks. You look at the pass rush win rate, and it was at like 7.3%. You look at the true pass rush win rate, and that's talking like really on one-on-ones, 12.2. So I thought it was a solid addition. We're going to continue here with Devondre Campbell. So we talk about this at linebacker. Drake Greenlaw, probably going to miss a good portion of the season, and they're probably only going to bring him back when he is truly ready. And I imagine that's going to be like a little bit before the postseason. So we're talking he's probably out like the first 8 to 10 to 12 weeks. So it's going to be Campbell, who is a real solid linebacker in the NFL. He's going to be playing there next to Fred Warner, and he's probably going to be your lead snap getter at linebacker next to Warner. Just again, given Greenlaw coming back, they're going to bring him back, I imagine, again, slowly. So I like his addition. Better coverage skills than you would anticipate. He kind of broke out a few seasons ago there for the Packers. And then they go back to the defensive line, this time the interior. And I love the addition of Malik Collins. Like, not that great as a run defender, just not. But what he does as someone who just goes and gets after it as a pass rusher, it can't be overstated or understated. Like you look at what he did last year, 45 pressures, 7 sacks for the Texans. He had a pass rush win rate of 11.5%. That's actually really good on the interior. You look at the guys that were good on the interior for the Niners last season, and it's Javon Hargrave, who had a 13.7% win rate. You have Eric Armstead, who had the 14.6. So I really like his addition there, mainly just as a pass rusher. You're going to bring, I think, a different collection of players in there as early down run stuffers. At least that's just my opinion on it. And then they go get Yatir Gross-Matos. That's right, I said it incorrectly because I normally do. I always want to say Gross-Matos, but is what it is. He kind of had an underwhelming career at Carolina, being drafted. I think it was the second round out of Penn State. Was never really could establish himself as the running mate there with Brian Burns. It just was very lackluster. He's going to be part of the rotation, and I like him better in that mold anyway. So they add him there. They still have Drake Jackson, though. I don't have a good pulse of how they feel about Drake Jackson. How many snaps did he play last year? Like 300, right? He played 199. Was he hurt during a portion of the season? Yeah, he had a knee injury. Okay, so yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, and I'm kind of curious how they feel about like Robert Beal. Although they bring in Leonard Floyd, who's kind of a similar build to Robert Beal, so it's going to be fascinating how this works. They also add Jordan Elliott to the interior. That might be the next name they have up here. Well, regardless, let's talk about him here as just someone who's been very mediocre. I really liked him coming out of Mizzou. Didn't really live up to my expectations there at Cleveland, though. And I mean, there were a lot of good defensive line players there at Cleveland, and he still managed to see the field a ton. I think he's relatively solid. He's probably going to be the early down guy with Malik Collins coming in on more passing situations or like third downs and whatnot. So they're probably going to have a fairly even split. They do bring back Feliciano, which is great because, he ended up usurping Burford, who just played bad last year, and I don't think Aaron Banks on the left side was that much better. I'll talk about the offensive line a little bit more when we get to the roster. Joshua Dobbs, man, he had that fun early half of the season for the Cardinals, eventually got traded after Cousins went down, and he is an okay backup quarterback. Not like, I think if he needs to come in and start a few games, then you feel good about him. But as we saw, as more of this like long-term fringe starter, not there. It's not there. But I mean, he's coming in to be the backup. I think it's a quality pickup after Darnold goes and signs with the Vikings, actually, nonetheless. So they just kind of like flip quarterbacks. That's kind of funny. Got Jordan Elliott, Rocky Ya-Sin, probably more of a camp body. Rocky Ya-Sin's kind of at that point of his career where he's more depth than anything else. I think the cornerback room for the Niners is very, very juicy, and I actually really look forward to talking about them. I don't know how Rocky Ya-Sin plays into this. He really feels more like he'll be on the outside looking in. Speaking of which, here's one of the guys that I'm going to be curious about if he ends up being a starter, Isaac Yiadom, who kind of came out of nowhere last year after kind of being a little lackluster with the Broncos to begin his career. Then after that, just had kind of a meh year with the Giants. Ended up getting benched in 2001 with the Packers. With Houston, he never really hit the field at all. He was more special team player, eventually got waived. And then last year with the Saints, I don't know if it clicked with him, but he had a career year, had his best season, allowed a completion rate of 50%, had 11 pass breakups and 1 interception. He did that over 517 snaps. So he might end up being the other starter there. Because spoiler alert, Deommodore Lenoir, I think, ends up playing mostly in the slot this year. I know he's someone that played outside and inside, but I think he's going to end up being their slot player. So Yiadom, I think, could end up being the starter across from Ward, though there's another name I'll talk about when we get to their draft class that I think might end up being the starter. Absolutely loved the kid, and I can't wait to talk about him. Brandon Parker, he's some offensive line depth. That's really about it. Might end up making the squad. Who knows? Outside of that, they just got some guys that they re-signed, like George Odom, one of the best special team players in the league. Kevin Givens, who was there with the squad last year. He's going to be, I don't want to say heavily utilized, but he's going to be very involved in that defensive interior rotation. Conley was kind of solid down the stretch for the squad, but the wide receiver room's kind of like, as long as Ayuk is still there, it's pretty meaty. It really, really is. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about what this team added via the draft. With the 49ers first round selection at pick 31, they go wide receiver Ricky Pearsall, which again led in some more credence to, okay, Brandon Ayuk is probably gonna get moved, which again, let's refresh ESPN, still on the team, no breaking news. So Ricky Pearsall comes in, and I really like the pick. He was 32nd on my overall big board. He was someone who, going into the offseason draft process, I thought was going to be more of a slot only, probably just work majority of the time from the slot, whether it was 60, 65%. Just because of the frame at 6'1", 189, a guy that predominantly kind of worked in the slot. But then he goes to the Senior Bowl, and it's like, my gosh, man, not only is he a smooth route runner, but his release package is kind of nutty. He had one hell of a showing. He also tested exceptionally well, running a 4.4 140, had impressive agility scores and explosive scores. This was a cat that had some highlight catches there at Florida, and just I think you could really, honestly, you probably just play him all over the field. Now, with Brandon Ayuk still there, he's not going to see a lot of playing time. Like, you got Ayuk, you got Debo, you got Jawan Jennings. Pearsall's probably that other wide receiver. We've seen Debo get banged up. Again, don't know what the situation is going to end up turning out for Brandon Ayuk. But Pearsall will probably see some time at some point this season. This is a look to the future. I really like this addition. I like it for the offense in general. Someone you could also work in motion, work in screens, and jet sweeps. So I really like it. You go to the second round, and Renardo Green out of Florida State, legitimately, I think he's going to end up being the guy that ends up starting next to Tarvarius Ward. And I mean, Green's someone who has inside-outside flexibility, whether it's in the slot or as a boundary corner. He ended up being, where on my big board? He was pretty high. He was 61. So he goes in about the range that I thought he would. He was corner 9 for me. Had a solid testing time, but just like someone who like transitioned from safety, played corner, has that inside-outside flexibility, good length, and just has that physicality to play and press. And I think defensively, this is again a team that will play some press. It will play some cover 3 match. It'll play some man coverage. I don't think the defense is radically going to change, like schematically, from what we saw last year. I'll talk about some of the difference when we get to the coaching staff, but I thought Green was a perfect fit for this squad, man. I really, really do. And why I think he ends up playing the outside is just because I don't think he necessarily brings the same physicality during the routes, just in coverage, as he does, like, compared to what he does in the run game. I just don't see that same physicality to his game. But like, this was a dude that played hella good. Ended up having 3 pass breakups. Had an interception last year as well. Allowed a completion rate of 51.7%. Just was a hell of a good player. And then in the third round, they addressed the offensive line. Hella good. That interior needed addressing. And they grab Dominic Purdy. I think he ends up being maybe a starter at some point this season. If you're unfamiliar with Purdy, he played both left tackle and left guard at Kansas the last 2 years. Last year, he was the left tackle. The year prior, he was the left guard. You go back to what he was at Central Missouri. He was playing right tackle. He was playing left tackle. So someone who has flexibility at a variety of different spots. I think he took a couple of snaps under center or at center during the Senior Bowl, but someone who's got really good movement skills, and I think he ends up usurping somebody at guard. I don't know how quickly into the season, but he's a really good fit just for the blocking scheme in general. Spoiler alert, it's wide zone. With his movement skills, he's just a great fit. I thought these were 3 really good pickups for the Niners, and some people were like, Ricky Pearsall, that's kind of a reach. Again, 32nd on my big board. I didn't think it was a reach. I didn't expect him to see him in the first round, but I thought he'd be early off the board in the second. And then in the fourth, they get Malik Mustafa, which is a little fascinating because I feel like they got their future at safety with Hufanga, with Brown, but I mean, he kind of fits what they want to do. Someone who's very explosive coming downhill, doesn't mind laying the lumber. Had showed some good ball skills at Wake Forest, had 3 pass breakups along with the interception last year, 51.7% completion rate, which typically with the safety position, especially if you're playing deep, a bit that it's going to be a little inflated. That, like, honestly, the analytics don't necessarily tell the whole story when it comes to how to play the safety position as it does like the corner position. But dude was hella good, playing a lot around the box just because he's so good around the line of scrimmage or coming downhill. Like, looking at his testing, ran a 4.52, 40, 22 bench press reps. That was, I think, among the top in the class. I think it was only Michael Dole out of Miami, Ohio, had more bench reps than Malik Mustafa. Mustafa's explosive scores were nuts. 41.5-inch vert, had 126 inches in the broad. Again, someone who it's like, okay, I feel like this guy's probably more of a box safety in the NFL. And I've said that, quite frankly, about all of the Niners safeties, and they've made it work. They've not been liabilities when having to play kind of a deep middle. Guys like Brown, guys like, especially Hufanga. Hufanga, I thought solely box guy, and he has been quite a bit of a ball hawk for the Niners. So this is a guy that just fits their scheme, and it's good player. It's where I had him going. I had him as a 4th round pick. Then you go to the other pick in round 4, Isaac Guerendo. Oh man, this is a phenomenal pickup. Like someone who he is very, very much a developmental back. Someone who didn't really get a lot of starting opportunity. If you want to go back and just kind of look at the rundown over his career, he was initially at Wisconsin. He didn't really start ever at Wisconsin. Some of that was injury, where he had a hamstring injury, a Liz Frank injury there at Wisconsin, but then kind of became the backup because they had Braylon Allen. He transfers to Louisville in 2023, ends up starting 1 game, but like was obviously the better back compared to, what was it? What was the other Louisville back there? Jahar Jordan. Didn't love him. Someone who was undersized, and I honestly didn't think had that great of launch speed. But yeah, like Guerendo was the better back. He might not, the division's not developed yet, but someone who is big at, let's see, where are you at? 6 foot, 221 pounds, ran a 4.33. Hello. The explosive scores were nutty at 41.5-inch vert, 129 inches in the broad, but also the agility scores were pretty darn good. He had a sub 7-second 3-cone, very solid. It's just a matter of developing that vision. Right now, I feel like he's more of that see daylight and go, tough to bring down. Like if you look at the other analytics when it comes to him, he had 34 missed tackles, but his yards after contact were well above 4 yards, which that's a really good number. Really good. So someone that they're going to develop, he's probably going to be like running back 4 on the squad as he develops, because I don't think anyone's taking the place of Elijah Mitchell. The Niners love him. He's been a very reliable backup to CMC. Jordan Mason, you can make an argument Mason's been around here for a little bit longer, so I feel like he gets the nod ahead of Guerendo. Guerendo, though, is someone I think, when it comes to the future, is a big bright spot for the squad. And then in the 4th, their 4th round pick, they grab Jacob Cowan. I really liked him a lot, coming out of Arizona, formerly of UTEP. Undersized, feels like a slot only. Real fun player, good after catch, super quick. Probably needs to develop his route tree a little bit, just because of like UTEP and Arizona. They didn't really use him, or at least have a diverse route tree for him. But someone I really liked, and probably ends up making the squad, really. And then in the 6th round, they snag Jarrett Kingston out of USC, formerly of Washington State. And I really like this. He was 29th among my interior players, including guards and centers. And for one, he had a really good Hula Bowl. He was actually pretty darn solid last year, despite, I get it, USC's offensive line was weak in some spots, but he wasn't the weak link there. And he was playing, like he was splitting between right tackle and right guard. So like he was someone who just never really got a fair shake. I talked about him as a sleeper during the draft process. His pro day was phenomenal. Ran a 5.02 40. That's a ludicrous number for an interior player. Had 36 reps in the bench. That was the 2nd highest mark I had among interiors. Only Bo Limmer had more. And then 31.5-inch vert. Just did great in the explosive and in the agility drills. Really really quality player who has a good shot at making the roster, but at the very least is going to be someone on the practice squad who this is a great scheme fit and maybe long term ends up being a starter, whether it's at guard or, man, low key, maybe right tackle. Because I'm not sold on McKivitz, but I really liked the pickup there. And then in the 7th round, they take Tatum Bethune. For me, it was kind of a whatever pick. Little short. He's kind of a bit of a bowling ball, but someone who's very explosive, likes to put his, not afraid to put his nose in the action, but he was easily fooled by misdirection, play action, motion, stuff like that. Just kind of you look at him as like, yeah, he's probably going to be a solid special teamer. And honestly, that's probably the only way he makes the roster. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about the coaching staff. Kyle Shanahan will be the coach for the 49ers until he doesn't want to be. He is arguably the best head coach in the NFL. It's just, Andy Reid's a thing. So gonna have to settle for second right now. But he is one of the best offensive-minded coaches in football. He has just been wonderful. He's been able to keep this 49ers team not just competitive, but dominant in some regards over his tenure. He's just wonderful. So what does he do that's so wonderful? It stems from that wide zone blocking scheme. He's so good at it that now 2/3 of the NFL has been incorporating this blocking scheme to some regard. He has taken what his dad has taught him and taken it the extra mile. He has been using emotion at a huge rate. Not nearly as one of his apprentices, Mike McDaniel, but when it comes to the wide zone and when it comes to motion, well, Kyle Shanahan is only second to Mike McDaniel. He has been a trendsetter when it's come to NFL offenses, but he's not set in his ways, right? He's sprinkled in, he's incorporated a little bit of that, a little bit of power concepts and inside zone to keep teams, essentially keep defenses on ice skates, right? On their heels. And it's not to the degree of what we saw with a Sean McVay last season, right? Because again, this is a team still widely using a wide zone. But when it comes to the passing game, he's not nearly leaning on as much on screens and RPOs and play action, which we've kind of come to associate that with more of this wide zone scheme. Because it's a scheme that wants to get the ball into the hands of their playmakers as early as possible and go let them make plays. But that hasn't been the case with Brock Purdy at the helm. And we'll talk a little bit about Brock Purdy when we get to the offense, but he has been a bit underrated and to some degree disrespected. I get not talking about him as an elite quarterback in the NFL. But when it comes to how he runs this system, it's hard not to include him as a top 7 and for goodness sake, top 10 quarterback in the NFL. So what this system has been doing under Brock Purdy is, hey, we're confident in how you see the field, how you process the field. We will show similar looks to the defenses. We will give them similar motion, but we're going to run a variety of different things. We just want you to go out there and make the right reads, and he has been doing that. This team was near the bottom when it came to RPOs and screens. They're more middle of the pack when it comes to play action, but typically you use play action to help out your quarterback. And when you have such a potent run game, you typically see those teams lean heavily into the play action, but they don't do that. They don't do that. And when it comes to Brock Purdy, he is just so efficient at the on the intermediate parts of the field that he's able to precisely with great precision place the football to allow his playmakers to create after the catch. And I mean, what he does in the short to intermediate game, because let's be honest, Brock Purdy, he's got a bit of a noodle for an arm. So teams don't necessarily worry about him when it comes to what he can do downfield. which allows him to be exceptionally effective when he does attack downfield. He had a 68 adjusted completion percentage on passes 20 yards or more. That's a ridiculous number. Like we talked about, like with Geno Smith, not last year, but the year before, where it was like, man, he was just incredibly accurate when attacking downfield. And he was around like 56, 58% in terms of adjusted completion percentage. And while like typically you're going to see, you know, the upper half of quarterbacks, they'll typically be in that like 45, maybe close to 50 range. Geno was at like 56, 58. And it was like, okay, I don't see him being able to replicate that. I think Purdy, while it might not be 68, he might be closer to that Geno range, which makes you very deadly downfield. This is like Kyle Shanahan has him and John Lynch. You gotta give John Lynch some credit. Have assembled a team that is so scary when it comes to the running game. Remember, when it came to their efficiency, they were first in rushing offense. That it has opened up the passing game, and Brock Purdy has been able to be very like mistake free, like 18 turnover worthy plays. Okay, it's not like that's bad. It's not like that's not true. That's basically on par with Dak Prescott, and we'd argue like Dak Prescott last year was relatively mistake free. And I know people, I talked about this in my Cowboys video. It was just more of Dak's turnover-worthy plays actually ended up being turnovers. With Brock Purdy, I felt like some of that was the case last year as well. Not to say he didn't have a bad game here or there, but like Brock Purdy's good at not putting the ball in harm's way. Brock Purdy is also good at putting the ball where his pass catchers can make plays after the catch. And that has in turn created the first best, the tippity top in terms of passing efficiency in the league last year. This offense was not just unstoppable, they were undeniable. They were phenomenal. Kyle Shanahan has created a monster. Truly has. And now they're going to have to figure out how to pay some of those parts, but I digress. Let's talk about the rest of the coaching staff here. As you have Chris Forster, who will now officially be the solo OC. You had Clint Kubiak. Hopefully I'm not mixing up Clint and Clay, but you had one of the Kubiak sons who was the passing game coordinator. He's now off to greener pastures, I suppose, where he's going to get a shot to be just the OC by himself in New Orleans. But Forster has done a really good job. He was the run game coordinator, former O-line coach. He's done a really good job here. I feel like he deserves a stint as an OC. If you're unfamiliar, he was the Dolphins OC for a year, but kind of ran into some like personal demons, personal trouble, and like honestly his ability to like come back from that and just it's kind of an inspiring story, man. Like again, he's had his demons in the past, but being able to overcome that is just huge. But he's done a great job here with just again with the offense, with the offensive line in particular, especially for a team to be so efficient as a run blocking unit. Despite, I would say, not being outside of like Trent Williams, not being equipped the best on the offensive line. But let's talk about the defense, because this is where things maybe get a little bit more fascinating. But I do think we're going to see more of what we've seen over the last few years. It might not be nearly as conservative as we saw with Wilkins last season, or Wilkes, but kind of felt like a scapegoat. Like I thought he did a really good job with the defense last year. So like Nick Sorensen's kind of inherited a really good situation. And I don't think we're going to see too much change. Maybe you see the blitz rate go up a little bit. But if you're unfamiliar with Sorensen, he was the defensive passing game specialist and the nickels/slot defensive coach here for the Niners. Prior to that, he was a special teams coordinator for the Jags. He was also a DB coach for the Seahawks, and now he is here as the defensive coordinator. He was a safety in the league for 10 years. But I don't think we're going to see too much of a difference in terms of what this defense does. I think you're going to be getting a team that likes to stunt over blitzing, though we might see a little bit more blitzing, man. Who knows? But I think we're going to, for the most part, see lots of cover 3, lots of man coverage, maybe be a little bit more press. Maybe you're going to put those corners on a little bit more islands. I don't know. We'll kind of see as it goes, but I don't think we're going to see too much of a change from the norm. Because again, defensively, this team was incredible last season. Let's talk about some of the other coaches on the staff here. As you do have, you got like Daniel Bullocks, who's now going to be the full defensive backs coach. Remember, you had Thorson kind of in that role last season. Bullocks was just the safeties coach. Now he moves in, just kind of taking over the whole secondary as a unit. But I mean, hey, the way the safeties have developed for the Niners last couple of years, I kind of talked about like Jair Brown and you got Hufanga. I think Bullocks is going to be hella good, so I'm not too worried about that. We got Brian Griese here as the quarterback's coach. Dolphin great. Well, I guess his father. But to be fair, Brian spent 1 year in Miami. But he's done a hell of a job. He's been the quarterback's coach here the last 2 years. And you got to give some of Brock Purdy's development. I'm sure you got to give him some kudos. So I'm kind of curious. Maybe is he in line for bigger opportunities elsewhere as an OC? As we have seen the 49ers, well, their offensive coaches kind of plucked. As Clint Kubiak headed to New Orleans as the OC. You had Mike McDaniel getting a head coaching job with the Dolphins. Bobby Slowick ends up following DeMeco Ryans out there to Houston. So perhaps maybe Griese's in line for maybe a bigger role somewhere else. We also have Leonard Hankerson. I believe he's in his 2nd year as the wide receivers coach, but he coaches a very good group there at wide receiver. Johnny Holland has been the linebackers coach here since I suppose since Kyle Shanahan's been here, and he's developed a really good linebackers. Like, linebackers come here and they do hella well. Like, developing like Dre Greenlaw, like Fred Warner. Oren Burks was actually really solid for this squad when he got his call. Like, don't sleep on Holland here, man. He's hella good. Chris Kurzek. I'm terrible with names. Apologies. But he's done a phenomenal job with the defensive line. Outside of Nick Bosa, it kind of feels like there's this revolving door of, hey, I bring in defensive line players and I make them play hella good. Like, honestly, outside of like a Nick Bosa, you've had Eric Armstead and whatnot, but like you've had guys really come in here and just like break out and just play really well. So I don't know. Maybe that's good news for Yetur Gross-Matos. We'll see. Clay Kubiak is the passing game specialist. Probably the next guy in line. Truly the next guy in line to get a call or a shout out somewhere else. So that'll be, you got to be on the lookout for that. But Clay Kubiak, definitely him and honestly Chris Forster. They play a heavy hand in the game day play, at least what the game plan is heading into game day. And then Mike Lombardi, he's a senior offensive assistant, guy that's been around for a little bit. We also got Brandon Staley. He's an assistant head coach, and he's a defense coach. Listen, man, I get it. Like, I thought it was a really bad run there with the Chargers. Like, for a team that also invested like top dollar on that defense, for that defense to be just blah was a bad look. I don't know when he will get another go as a DC or a head coach, But keep in mind, he was a really good defensive-minded coach with the Rams. So maybe this is what he needs, man. Maybe this is what he needs. Robert Turner Jr. is your running backs coach. And KJ Wright, hey, yo, defensive quality coach. That's sick. That's sick. KJ Wright, former player, probably most known for his stints with the Seahawks and the Raiders. But former Mississippi State linebacker, now is a coach in the NFL. Again, I love seeing these former players end up being coaches in the NFL. It's just hella fun. And like KJ Wright's got a ton of experience, whether it's as someone who can go and rush the passer or just what he can do from more of a traditional linebacker standpoint. So just having him in the coaching room, I think, is huge. So this is another team that just has a lot of good coaches. And it does feel like they do a good job of replenishing their staff as well. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about this offense. As per usual, you're going to see my grades for each position group right over here. Let's start with the quarterback, as I got a B for the quarterbacks on this roster. Typically, I'll give out an A grade for quarterbacks if they have an elite starter. And I just don't think Brock Purdy is elite, not from like a physical or athletic tools standpoint. But what he does for this offense is just his command over it. How precise he is as a passer, 78.3% adjusted completion percentage. Like, Kyle Shanahan has a lot of confidence in Brock Purdy, and it's deservingly so. Brock Purdy is a top 10 quarterback easy. The question is he in that top 7 mix? Does he sneak into top 5? I don't know, man. I just think the limited arm, I say limited, just limited by comparison to, well, those guys around, like the other guys in the league, like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Lamar, people and such. Like, but I think it's fair to argue that he's on a Burrow level. I think that's a fair argument. So you have to look for that, man. I think Brock Purdy is a top 5 quarterback. There I said it. Because like I said, the guy's precise. He knows how to put his players in position to get yards after the catch. And when he does take those deep shots, he don't miss. He don't miss. He has one of the best running backs in football behind him in Christian McCaffrey. This guy's a touchdown machine, and he has been able to stay healthy. I was pretty critical of the trade for Christian McCaffrey just because I was like, man, can he stay healthy? How much difference does a running back really make in terms of value? Well, I'm not saying, hey, go out and get yourselves running backs, spend highly on running backs. But Christian McCaffrey certainly is an exception to the standard. He certainly is. What he does just as a pass catcher and a ball carrier, the guy is phenomenal. He is great. You go to the receiving core, and it's just playmaker rich. With Brandon Ayuk, I think is another guy that's like a top 10 wide receiver in the league. Last year was like, I feel like the true coming out party where it's like, hey, watch out. I might be a top 5, top 7 wide receiver in the NFL. He was absolutely phenomenal. Great hands, great at the contested catch. In terms of after the catch, 12 forced missed tackles. Hella good. You also have Deebo Samuel there, who's just a yak machine. He's just kind of their weapon. You do worry about the health. And honestly, if I'm just straight up, I'd be keeping Brandon Ayuk. Like, if I had to say bye-bye to like Deebo, it sucks. But Brandon Ayuk has just less tread on the tires, and I think more years ahead. Like, to me, that makes more sense. But I get it, like, Deebo's very important to this offense just because you can line him up anywhere, and he's a threat. Like, he had, 25 forced missed tackles as a receiver last year? That's absolutely ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. You go to the slot, you have Jawan Jennings, man. One of the more underrated receivers, I think, in the league, just because he ends up being like the fourth or fifth option in this passing game, but like when they throw at him, he's reliable as hell. I really liked him coming out of Tennessee. I thought he was more of a day 2 pick. He ends up going, I think, in the 7th round. But the dude can produce after the catch and create, and he can be a consistent chain mover. George Kittle, it's kind of wild that he kind of gets overlooked when we talk about like among like the top tight ends in the league. But like when it comes from like an all-around standpoint, like great blocker, great receiver. Again, just there's other targets in this offense, so it's like he just doesn't have like the game-to-game consistency. But like he's great, man. He's great. He's a top 5 tight end in the league. He's phenomenal. Like the playmakers for this team is ludicrous. But we get to the offensive line, and there are not necessarily a lot more questions, but there's definitely a lot more. How are they gonna make it work again with this unit? Like again, Trent Williams, he's what, going on 36? He's up there in years, but the play hasn't slowed down. Like he is still probably the best tackle in the NFL. But then you look at right tackle and like Colton McKivitz, fine run blocker, but not great as a pass protector. Allowed 47 pressures, 9 sacks. Like you gotta want to be looking for that heir apparent, right? And I just don't think that guy's on the roster. And it's like, no, you know what? They end up extending McKivitz, and it's like, okay, well, when Trent Williams like hands it up, like, what do you got? Like, I just don't feel like there's a backup plan there, and I just wish there was a better option on this team than McKivitz. You go to the interior, you have Aaron Banks, you have John Feliciano. Feliciano, pretty solid, looked really good once he usurped. Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting. Spencer Burford's Burford just was an absolute disaster last year. And I'm gonna be honest, man. I don't think Aaron Banks was that far off. Like, I don't think he was a mediocre run blocker and straight up okay as a pass protector. Like, he is certainly, I would say he is probably the 5th best offensive lineman on this among this starting unit. Could be a toss-up between him and McKivitz, but I think McKivitz is a much better run blocker. So yeah, no, I'm gonna give it to Banks, man. I think it's Banks. Feliciano, solid, good, was really good for the Niners once he stepped in. Question is, what's the long-term plan? He will be going on 33. So I don't know, maybe next year start to look for the heir apparent. You got Jake Brendel, who's honestly pleasantly been really good for the squad. Very good run blocker. Just the hiccups as a pass protector. Last season ended up allowing 29 pressures, 2 sacks. Not ideal, but again, another guy that's a very, very good run blocker. I'd argue he's probably their 3rd best offensive lineman. I don't know. Him and Feliciano, I think it's pretty close. But let's take a look at the depth along this offensive line, because like, I truly believe Dominic Purdy is going to end up starting for somebody. Whether that's Banks, Feliciano, though Feliciano was really good. Like, Banks never hit the level Feliciano was on during the end of the season. So I think Banks or even McKivitz, dude, you could kick Purdy out to tackle. Like, regardless, I think Purdy ends up being a starter at some point prior to the end of the season. I really, really do. I mentioned Spencer Burford, just wasn't great. That's why I really think Jarrett Kingston has a good shot at making this roster. Ben Barch has experience both at center and at guard. Last season, he had to fill in because of injury. I mean, he filled in for a game. It was okay. He was someone I liked coming out of, what was his school? It was St. John's. So he had an impressive Senior Bowl, and things just didn't really work out with the Jaguars. So maybe that is somebody who can challenge eventually. And if anything, he ends up being good depth. Chris Hubbard, I think, is a fine backup, one of the better backups in the NFL. Not great as a starter, but if he has to start a couple of games, I don't think you're too worried about that. They also have Jalen Moore, who's been... Okay, I mentioned that this team doesn't have a backup plan from Trent Williams. I think it's probably Jalen Moore. Like, whenever called upon, he's been good. He's been solid. I liked him coming out of Western Michigan. Ends up being a 5th-round pick back in 2021. And hasn't had his number called a ton. But when he hasn't been bad. He's going into a contract year. You got to believe this is probably their left tackle of the future. I hope they look for another tackle, though. I really do. But yeah, no, it's probably Moore's going to be your next guy up. And then it's going to go Hubbard. Brandon Parker, kind of, he's a guy here. That's about it. You got Drake Nugent as a UDFA. I liked Nugent quite a bit. I'm kind of curious. I don't know how he makes this squad. I really, really don't. Man, yeah, I don't know how he makes the squad. He's probably going to be a practice squad name. Pat Elfline, he's still bouncing around the league here. Just going to be a camp body, but honestly, the depth's not that bad. If again, I mean, I get it. You're kind of like, you're hoping things work out with Purdy. So like, if he has to step in, or like Ben Bart looked good in a very small sample size for the Niners, and also was just very mediocre with the Jags. You got Jalen Moore. So it honestly might be one of the better backup groups in football, which might sound kind of funky because like, it's not one of the higher end starting groups, I would say. Looking at the wide receiver depth, they got Ricky Parasol. He's going to be their wide receiver 4. Cowan's probably going to make the squad. Ronnie Bell, though, him and Chris Conley are probably, if they hold on to 6 wide receivers, that position battle. I think Bell just offers a bit more as a special teamer. Like, he was a really good gunner. I don't see Danny Gray making the roster here. Trent Taylor, he's back after being a 5th-round draft pick for the squad back in 2017. He's nothing more than a return man, special teamer. Like, I feel like you'd have to, like there ain't no way Cowan goes to the practice squad, so he's going to be on this roster as a 4th-round pick. It's like, can anyone beat out Bell? So, like, yeah, the Niners are kind of a tough team to make a wide receiver. Frank Darby, low-key, on this squad. I liked him coming out of Arizona State. I wanted to love him like Brandon, like I liked Brandon Ayuk, but it never happened. It never happened for him. But I remember him coming out of Arizona State. He was very much a screen or vertical threat. Malik Turner's here. He's kind of a camp body around the league now, but very good receiving group. You go to running back Elijah Mitchell, one of the best backups in the NFL. The Niners love him as a backup there to CMC. You look last season, like his number wasn't called on a ton, but the yards after carry at 3, that's good. 18 forced missed tackles on 75 snaps is really good. Like, he's just a very quality back. Jordan Mason did see some reps last year, and honestly, relatively solid, man. Pretty darn good, but he's more of their bruiser. So I think Isaac Guerrero, he's more than just a bruiser just because of that long speed. Patrick Taylor launched out to make the squad. He was at Green Bay, had some gaffes last year. Doubt he makes this roster. Cody Schrader probably is going to the XFL. Probably, most definitely. He's probably be on their practice squad. I can't remember if practice squad players are allowed to. Probably not. They're probably not allowed to play for the XFL. I'm not confident, man. I'm not confident about that. Regardless, Kyle Juszczyk deserves a shout out here. One of the few teams that really uses an H-back, a fullback, and he does a hell of a lot for this squad, mainly just because of what he can do, not just as a run blocker, which, hey, fun fact, he's kind of hella good at it, but also what he does as a receiver, as he had over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns last year, so yeah, he's kind of good like that. Tight end group behind George Kittle, because this is a team that they like their 12 personnel. Logan Thomas is there, very reliable receiver in terms of his on-field production. The injuries kind of get in the way, but here he gets to serve as a tight end too, and that's great. Brayden Willis, I'm a big fan of. I think he's very flexible. He's someone that could be used as an H-back, and also I thought that he might be more of a moving more towards Kyle Juszczyk role. Maybe that's something to look out for the future, but I really liked him. I actually think I had him higher than Cameron Latu coming out of the 2023 draft. That point, it's kind of, for me, it's a toss-up between Sorbert and Latu if they hold on to a 4th tight end. Guys like Mason Pline probably going to end up making the practice squad coming out of Furman as a tight end there. Let's look at, well, I guess we could talk about quarterback a little. Not really. There's nothing to talk about at quarterback. Brock Purdy is your starter. Dobbs is your backup. Allen will be the emergency. Tanner Mordecai will be playing in the XFL. I don't even think he makes the practice squad just because I don't see a future for him with the Niners. So there is that. Let's go ahead. Let's talk about this defense. When it comes to this defense, what is there to say other than they're a dominant defense? They truly are. They have some studs on defense, starting with Nick Bosa on that defensive line. Had a monster year last year, 95 pressures, 14 sacks via PFF. That was during the regular season. Had like a 22-23% pass rush win rate. Just phenomenal. So it doesn't really, honestly, it doesn't really matter. Even if it's a revolving door across from him, which it has been most years, that's A-okay. I kind of talked about a little bit in depth Leonard Floyd, what he's going to bring to the squad when we were talking about what they did in free agency, and how I probably suspect Yetur Gross-Matos is going to be like an early down player for this team. And then I don't know how Drake Jackson's really going to play into this rotation. We just haven't seen a lot from him. I know he's dealing with a knee injury right now, should be back in the next week or so for training camp, but he came out as a toolsy prospect out of USC, someone that still needed a lot of polish to his game. I don't know how far along he is, and I'm kind of curious because like Robert Beal in the 2023 draft, they drafted him the 5th. He was a very similar prospect in terms of tools and athletic ability, tools, length, and whatnot. Going to the interior, you got Javon Hargrave. He's probably going to be your lead snap getter. And keep in mind, when I say defensive stars, these are the guys that I think are going to see the field the most. So you got Hargrave, who's just phenomenal. He ended up signing that big contract just a year ago, and he's just been really good for this squad. Next to him, I think Malik Collins. Malik Collins, if you go and look, like over the course of his career, he's averaging between 600 to 700 snaps a game. Wow, can you imagine? 600 or 700 snaps a year. So I think he's going to probably edge out, whether it's like Jordan Elliott or Kevin Givens. But it is going to be a healthy rotation when you do look at the rotation last year, how deep they actually went into the defensive line. You had guys like Armstead with 500 snaps. Hargrave had 632. Kinlaw 476. Even Givens, he had 400. So it's gonna be a 4-man rotation there on the interior. Let's go ahead. Let's actually just talk about the rest of the depth along this defensive line. I think you're gonna have the rotation between Collins, Elliott, and then Kevin Givens is gonna be that 4th man involved. But they also got like Kalia Davis, who's more of this big body player. Though I think there could be a good chance Evan Anderson ends up making the roster because he too is a bit of this squatty potty. who can eat space and is just strong as hell, but also has a little explosiveness to him. So that's someone to look out for. See if he stands out during training camp, maybe makes the roster. I'm kind of curious if Robert, like, I don't know if they, Robert Beal, I'm just super intrigued in. Like, he was someone that I didn't love coming out, but I understood the tools. And him being a developmental guy, maybe he ends up making the practice squad. But like, this was an edge room that, like, again, the rotation at edge, like for that edge 2 spot, had like, you had like 400, 300, and then 200 snaps. Like they had 3 guys there. So you're dealing with Floyd, you're dealing with Gross Matos, you're dealing with maybe Jackson or Beal, or maybe even Austin Bryant, who is just a solid depth player. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. Not too familiar with any of the other guys here. Well, that's not true. T.Y. McGill. He kind of had a hot start to his career in Indianapolis. Since then, it's just kind of been a journeyman. Not seeing a ton of snaps, but it's a very good defensive line. Truly is, even with the loss of like Eric Armstead, Cleveland Farrell, and whatnot. It's still really good. It's well coached. Not too worried about that. We move to the linebacker position. Fred Warner is the best linebacker in football at me. The dude's just great. He's wonderful. He was their lead snap getter last season. I don't think there's a better coverage linebacker in the league. He ended up having 4 interceptions, 3 pass breakups. He's a hard-hitting tackler. He is one of the few guys that I wouldn't mind being like the mid deep guy in a cover 3. Like he can cover that type of ground. He's just a very gifted athlete like that. Next to him will be Devondre Campbell, who is going to be filling in for Drake Greenlaw as Greenlaw heals up again. I don't think we see Greenlaw till near the end of the year to get ready for the playoffs, but Campbell's very good. He's very, very competent. His stay at Green Bay, he was exceptionally good. He was a tackling machine. He was solid in coverage. So I like that addition. That was a really good addition by the Niners. So let's take a look at the other guys that will be a part of the linebacker core here. As again, Dre Greenlaw is going to start the year on the IR. They got D. Winters, who they drafted in the 6th round all of a year ago. He's a very fine option there at linebacker, but again, he's more depth, more special teamer than anything else. You got Ezekiel Turner. Couldn't really tell you much about him, honestly. So like even Demetrius Flanagan Fowles, just 2 guys I'm a bit unfamiliar with when it comes to their game. I imagine they're more so special teamers than anything else. Tan Bethune's probably a long shot to make the roster, but Fred Warner, Campbell, I think that still is going to end up being one of the better linebacker duos in the NFL until Greenlaw gets back. Like, people forget how good Greenlaw is. Like, the dude is exceptionally great. He had last season, you look at his missed tackle percentage, it was low at 11.8. That's very solid for a linebacker. Had 7 pressures, 2 sacks, also in coverage, 3 pass breakups, allowed a completion rate of 68.5%. Anything sub 70 is like, okay, there you go, you're doing good. And I know it's just under sub 70, but still, he goes out there and gets the job done. Like, it was heartbreaking when he got hurt running onto the field there during the Super Bowl, like, and ends up hurting his Achilles. It was truly heartbreaking. Like, you hear Fred Warner shout out, no. Like, Dre Greenlaw is a very important part of this defense. He will be missed, but getting him back before the playoffs is huge. And then the secondary. I believe in the secondary a ton. I gave them an A+ grade. It's filled with, honestly, a ton of guys that I was like, I think they're going to be fine players in the NFL, and they have exceeded even that. It's kind of wild. Like, Diamador Lenore, I thought was going to be, I was like, yeah, he could be a fine player, and he's much more. Like, I think he's a very quality cornerback 2 and 3, but now I am assuming he's going to get to focus there playing the slot. I have heard in training camp they've been rotating players in and out of the slot. So maybe they still go with that, and which is fine. I think with Yadam and Green, those are two guys that can work inside and outside. More so with Green, I'd rather him work outside. That's why I believe Lenore is going to be your leader in the slot. Who was the leader in slot snaps last year? Oh, that's right. I keep forgetting they had Isaiah Oliver, who was all right. He was pretty good. Javarius Ward, probably one of the most underrated and disrespected corners in the NFL. Like, this guy's great. I loved this move when they signed him. I was like, oh man. Immediately I was like, oh, this team is going to be moving from more like under Saleh. They were a bit more quarters. I was like, they must be moving more to like a press man cover 3 system with this additional Ward, and which they have. And Ward's been excellent. He's been phenomenal. Like, let's just go ahead and take a look at what he accomplished last season. Here, I'm pulling up his stats right now. As he allowed a completion rate of 54.3%. That's great. And he had 16 pass breakups, 5 interceptions. I get it. He's a very physical corner. 12 penalties. That's a lot. That's a hell of a lot. But I mean, when he's manning up on the number 1 every game, the dude's a stud. He is a stud. Don't disrespect my man. I did say that I think it's going to be a competition between Isaac Yadam and Renardo Green. I'm going to give the nod to the 2nd round pick. Again, I was a bit of a big fan of his coming out, but I think their snaps are going to be very close to one another. The starters at safety, Hufanga, he's coming off, what was the injury with Hufanga? Wasn't it an ACL? Hufanga, it was an ACL injury. He's coming off of that, but dude, he's been good. He had 3 interceptions last year for this team. His missed tackle rate was low. Like, the dude was solid. And then, like, I think he's probably going to be more the guy that takes up the middle third. I say middle third, the deep third, or the deep middle. Bam. That's how you say it. Golly. Regardless, Jair Brown, I thought his game felt very similar to Jaquan Brisker, where it was like, man, this guy's really good underneath. Like, he eats underneath. His anticipation, how he picks up on route tendencies and route concepts. He's very explosive coming downhill as well. And he stepped in and he played really, really well for the Niners. He had 3 pressures, which I hope it. Again, this is what Sorensen was saying, that this team was going to be they were going to be attacking a bit more. So I hope they get him involved as a blitzer, because golly, this man was hitting home as a blitzer off the very small sample size that we had. If anything, like, with him, man, like he was just solid. He had 2 interceptions, 2 pass breakups. Like, this is a really good player. You're getting to usurp Gibson last year, who was still playing really well at his age. What is he? He was like 33. So, like, the secondary to me, I think, is about to eat. They're hella good. Let's talk about some of the depth, because the depth is pretty good there as well. We're gonna go with the corners first. Aubrey Thomas kind of played himself back into seeing some snaps, but he's gonna have some competition there now with Green added there. Samuel Womack has been a solid player for the squad when on the field. I really liked him coming out of, I think it was Toledo. But they also, okay, you got Chase Lucas here. He's a special teamer. That's just kind of what he was. Former Arizona State player. Arizona State, great Arizona State quality player. But it's a nice, comfy cornerback room. Oh, man, I really liked Darrell Luter coming out of South Alabama. It's just not been good since being drafted. Whenever on the field, it's just not been great for him. At safety, you got George Odom, one of the best special teamers in the league. And then Malik Mustafa, who's going to be a very good backup behind those guys. Taylor Hawkins. Eric Harris is interesting name. Someone who's kind of bounced around the league as a depth player. And then I'm not familiar with Jalen Mahoney. He was a UDFA, I think out of Vandy. Not familiar, didn't watch him. Not surprising I didn't watch much Vandy last year. What can I say? But it's a good safety group. It's a good safety room with eyes towards the future as well. Like, it's really good. This is going to be one of the best defenses in football once again. But let's go ahead. Let's get to the reason you're here. Let's project how this team does in 2024. In terms of strength of schedule, the Niners had the 17th ranked schedule last year. This year, I anticipate it to be a bit more easy, as I have y'all with the 11th easiest schedule in the league. Let's go ahead and project what this team's ceiling can be, as you will open against an old friend, an old foe, so to speak, in Aaron Rodgers. But you get that in Santa Clara. I'm going to give you all the win there. Then you travel to Minnesota. Minnesota's kind of a team that's kind of in the middle of like a rebuild. So I'm going to go ahead and have y'all get the victory there. When it comes to the division, the one team I think that can beat the Niners is the Rams. They split the series last year. To be fair, that first game was relatively close. And then the second game was the season finale where you rested the starters. The Rams ended up getting the win there. So I'm going to go ahead out on a limb, say maybe y'all split again this season. So I'll give the Rams a home win. But then you follow that up with home games against the Patriots and the Cardinals. Y'all have been the Seahawks' daddy the last couple of years. You swept them last year. So I'm going to go ahead and say you sweep them again. This is the one where I'm like, okay, I could see the Niners losing at home to the Chiefs. The Chiefs are fresh off a bye. That makes sense to me. Y'all, I don't care. Dallas is coming off a bye. Y'all pounded the Cowboys last year, 42-10 in Santa Clara. So let's give them a win. Coming out of your bye, you get the Buccaneers. That's a winnable game. You get Seahawks. The Packers are going to be an interesting one. It is in Lambeau. I'm going to lean with the Niners here, though. I'm going to lean with the Niners, but that one's a bit of a toss-up. Now, you travel to Buffalo to take on the Bills. The Bills are fresh off a bye. I think that's a losable game. But then I expect wins against the Bears, home win against the Rams. The Dolphins, I mean, I know it's in Miami, but at the same time, I mean, Mike McDaniel gets to face his former mentor. I'll give y'all that win. Lions almost beat y'all in Santa Clara last year. That was a very interesting playoff game, but again, we're projecting the ceiling of this team, so I'm going to give y'all the win there to finish out the season. So I have this team ceiling at 14 wins, and I think that's fair. When it came to my actual projection, I ended up going with 12-5. I think there's a couple of other games here that I think could get away from the Niners, like against the Packers here. Whether it's the Dolphins or the Lions, I think one of those games the Niners could end up losing. Let's go with the Dolphins since that one's an away game. And that puts y'all at 12-5, and I think that's fair. If anything, this team, it's going to be more about what they can do in the postseason. And with other up-and-coming teams like the Packers, like the Lions, can they make it to the Super Bowl? They certainly can. They should be the favorites to come out of the NFC. They really should. So it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be fascinating how they retain some of this roster after this season, having to pay Brock Purdy and such. What will happen with Brandon Ayuk? Again, that's still a mystery as of the recording of this video. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. If you want to check out how I think some of your divisional rivals will do, like the Rams, check out this video down here, or you can check out some of my scouting summer deep dive series for the 2025 NFL draft. I'll leave that right there. But as always, until next time, you be easy, my friends. Later.